video production. I'm Bob, a local self-employed plumber based in the northeast. I've been in business for 20 years and I've had experience of 35 years in the plumbing and heating industry. Mostly on domestic work, plumbing, central heating and small maintenance. One of the main reasons that I've produced this video is that time and time again, when I'm called out to small works, the customer comments in various ways. At last I found somebody who will do the small works. It's very hard to get plumbers to come out and do small works. Some have let me down, some have promised, some flatly refuse. And basically that is one of the problems of getting a decent all-round tradesman to come out and do small maintenance work at the right price. One of the other comments after the job is finished, and most of all, is that the customer comments to myself, Bob, you make that look too easy. Well, small works are easy, with a bit of forethought, a bit of knowledge, the right tools, and hopefully watching this video. I'm hoping to install in you, the householder, the easy way of maintaining and repairing small plumbing problems within your house. Small plumbing problems that we are called out daily. Every week, no hesitation, we have similar problems to what's on this video. And in this day and age of 1998, I'm afraid, depending on what part of the country that you live in, the hourly rate a tradesman can charge you is anything from £20 to £60 an hour. So it's not unreasonable for a small job to be carried out by a plumber, hour and a half, 2 hours, to end up with a bill £50, in excess of £100 in some areas, plus materials, plus VAT. So in reality, if I can help install and show you how to do the vast majority of these small outlets, these small jobs that we are called out to, then the investment of this video will pay for itself 10 times over. You really do them time and time again, and therefore stand back and say, I've done that. It gives you great pleasure. Truthfully it does. Even after I've been doing it 35 years, it sometimes gives me pleasure, even on a small job, which I do every week, every day. Saying, I've repaired that, I've maintained that, I don't need to renew it. That'll last another 5 years, another 3 years. But most of all, it cuts the bills out. With the right tools, as I've stressed before, which we will go through later on, a bit of forethought, a little bit of knowledge, and you will gain that knowledge and experience from watching this video. And even at the end of the day, if you have to watch this video 3 times, 5 times over to grasp the situation of repairing and maintaining, then that isn't a problem. It isn't a problem at all. You might watch the video and do one of the small jobs. You might watch the video 2 or 3 times and then attempt to do one of the small jobs. You might get up off your armchair after watching the video, run upstairs and do one of the small jobs without any tools, because there's a few that you don't need tools for, just little tricks. The tricks of the trade, shortcuts within this video, professional shortcuts. We show you how to strip them down, we show you how to repair them, we show you how to renew them. We show you simple little jobs. They are simple, they are easy, and I'm sure you will be able to handle them. Most of all, what will happen as we go along in the video, you'll see various jobs where a lot of people would say, I'm frightened, there's water involved, I might flood the place. Well, if you watch this video carefully, you'll notice that each time we carry out the work, where it's necessary, we always stress we turn the water off. Always turn the water off, then you have no problems at all. And even if you turn it back on, you've made a slight mistake and have to do it again, it'll only leak slightly, you can turn the water back off again. We will carry on with the video in its format, but I must stress that in certain parts of the country, water company regulations dictates different regulations. So therefore check, if you feel necessary, with your local water authority to see if it's applicable on what I've installed in your mind within this video of how to repair these jobs, how to maintain them. These fittings that I show you, these tools that I show you, are used nationally. They're all the same internally, they're all the same connections, they're all the same fittings. I will add small tools on as I go along in the video. These are all available from a good DIY or builder's merchants and not very costly. You will be able to use them time and time again, and I'm sure the same jobs will crop up time and time again within your house. So, let's not talk too much, let's not bore you. You're going to enjoy this. We're going to now carry on, take you across to where the tools are, and show you the tools that we recommend. At the end of this video, I will sit down and talk to you again, giving you helpful hints on various things that you should do within your home, once a fortnight, once a month. Little tricks that I pass on to my customers, and hopefully it cuts the cost down on future stripping out of material and new installations. So we'll now carry across to where the tools are, explain the tools to you, and then carry on with this video. Thank you. And we will start off with what we call gas pliers on the trade. It's an adjustable wrench. By pressing that little right side button, you can adjust it between the teeth to various sizes, locking it in positions that you want it to. They are a must as far as I'm concerned. Reasonably expensive, but once you buy them, a good quality set, definitely with that lock and screw. You can buy them where the individual no lock and screw, but they tend to slip and you can jam your fingers. Gas pliers. The small adjustment spanner, flexible between the 2 points. It's what we call a 1/2 inch adjustment spanner. The small Phillips or cross-headed screwdriver, a small flat-headed screwdriver, and a smaller, again, flat-headed screwdriver. With the added advantage of carrying our toolkit, some releaser now. We carry WD-40, which I find as a favourite of myself. We also carry, within our toolkit, usually in our overall pockets or wherever, a roll of PTFE tape. It is pipe thread tape, and it comes in a roll, costing about 30p a roll. A roll of this size will last a considerable time. It is plastic, flexible, and can be used in various jobs, as you will see as we go through this video, for various types of work. This is a must to carry in your toolkit on the plumbing side. These are the tools which I recommend, and therefore with these tools you will be able to carry out most of the jobs that we are going to show you. We'll now move on to our first job, which is a kitchen sink mixer, a monoblock mixer. And monoblock really means it's a single tap coming through a single hole in a sink unit, diverting to 2 heads, hot and cold, with a swivel spout. You can get them with 2 holes coming through a mixer, 2 individual taps, but the end product is 2 tap heads to maintain. So it doesn't matter what type of tap it is here, you'll still have 2 tap heads to maintain. We feel that working in a vicinity like this with waste holes and such forth, we always recommend that you put the plugs in the sink, because you yourselves, or even I, can drop a small screw now and then. Then it is retrievable from within the sink, and you're not losing it down the drain and then scouring your toolkit for a similar type of screw. Right. We have to turn the cold water off to carry out this job, e.g. because it is a cold tap. We find that in this property, the cold service cock to shut off the house is under the sink unit. It could be in your garage, it could be in a small utility room in the front of your house. But what I find is that most of the times it is under the sink unit and usually easy to get to. We've already turned the water off to the job, so therefore we'll carry on. What you have with this tap is a plastic head. Now we must remove that plastic head to get into the workings of the tap. So we take a small screwdriver, and on this occasion it is a flick top on the top to make the centre screw available to take the tap head on. So we insert our plastic head, a small screwdriver into the plastic head and flick it off. Place it to one side. What you then have is what you call a colour-coded piece of plastic, colour-coded. That sits in, determines the colour of your tap and whether it is hot or cold. We then need a cross-headed screw because the centre screw is a cross-head. We take that right out. Placing it on the windowsill. We then go back to our small flat-headed screwdriver because this is a plastic head which usually just pulls off or flicks off. This one just flicks off. You can get plastic heads which literally have got no screws in at all and they literally pull off. Determine what it is before you do this. We have now took the plastic cover off and now shown the total workability of the tap, which is the brass insert. The brass insert carries the washer, the spindle, and moves up and down depending on the motion you turn it right or left to shut the tap off or open it. In 99% of cases of plumbing, especially in this video unless I tell you, to loosen anything anti-clockwise, to tighten anything clockwise. Anti-clockwise to loosen, clockwise to tighten. We then take our small shifting spanner and you'll find on top of the insert a hex nut which you adjust your spanner to suit. We are now going to put some pressure in an anti-clockwise motion to loosen the tap insert. We are not holding anything against ourselves in the opposite direction because this is a mixer and can take the full weight of the pressure. So we are pushing up to loosen the tap insert anti-clockwise and it's moving. Now what you find is it can be fairly tight and you have to use your adjusting spanner nearly all the way out, or you can find in this occasion like this, it's not an old tap, so it will come out fairly easy, hand tight. You take it out and what you find, you've got a whole what we call brass insert with the spindle, the connection point for the head, the tap washer and the brass face the tap washer sits on, and the rubber washer with the locking nut that holds the washer in. What happens is, as you can see, if you turn your head, it comes down, therefore lets water through your tap, and the opposite way goes up. We recommend when you take these out and you find they're in good condition, that we can service and repair this insert. If you find, for some reason, the overall complaint is dripping but the tap not turning fully, locking, being tight, my recommendation is that you take this to the local plumber's merchant, show them the thread, the type, and say, can I have a complete new insert? Costing between £7 and £10. Discard that one and put a complete new insert in, as we are going to show you now. On this occasion the insert is fine, so we're going to show you how to change the tap washer. Usually you'll find your locking nut is reasonably accessible, so we turn it anti-clockwise and it's slack. We take the locking nut off and put it to one side. You will find that sometimes you can take a flat-headed screwdriver and just flick the washer off, always watching your fingers in it. I find that if you grip your brass face, grip your washer and turn as though it is on a thread, it usually comes out. usually comes out. We are having a bit difficulty with this one and it will come eventually. Typical when you run the video, you find that the washer is not coming out as it should, and therefore prove that this is live and no editing. We are getting the washer out, coming slowly, gripping it, and it is now off. There's your washer, a rubber washer, a bit smaller than a half-inch normal tap, but a rubber washer, hence quite common, easy to buy, individually costing about 10 pence, but you can buy them in packets of 10 5s. You find your brass face,
If there's any bits of rubber washer still stuck on there, scrape them out with a flat-headed screwdriver, discard them and clean that area. We then discard the rubber washer and get a new one out of our supplies. You might find that sometimes the rubber washer has the manufacturer's name on one side. If it has, then always put the manufacturer's name down onto the brass face of where the washer sits. Because if you accidentally place it the other way with the manufacturer's name on this side, then you haven't got a smooth finish, and when it sits down into the orifice in the brass face, your tap will leak. So the manufacturer's name, if any, new washer placed. If you find that the washer you've got is slightly bigger than that, don't worry, still put it in that area, get your locking nut, put your locking nut on in a clockwise motion, and it goes on usually very easily. Gas pliers and just a slight nick. You can leave it hand tight if you want, but a slight nick all across. You've then got a slightly bigger washer, so you get a pair of sharp scissors and you cut the washer to shape. Don't worry if it's a rough edge. It's the brass face against that area there that makes the watertight joint. So we've got the washer. What I would recommend at this stage is opening it till you've got a reasonable space between them 2 points, and then WD-40 in it, in that area. So therefore you can run it back, your WD-40 is in to the insert and is loosening any grease or stubborn grit that's in that area. We are now quite capable, whether that's a complete new insert or the one we have serviced as it is, in putting it back into this area. I would suggest at this moment in time that you look down this area, see if there's any bits of rubber washer, because sometimes these disintegrate if they're old and they're floating about in there. You can easily get them out. The last resort, if you can't get them out, is to turn your water on slowly and let it gush out of this area, therefore taking the rubber washer and the spare bits out of the area. We then put our brass insert back into the orifice of the mixer tap and turn it clockwise. This one turns reasonably easy, hand tight. You'll find that some of them, you've got to turn it up with a spanner. If you want, put a WD-40 on them threads as well. Then you get your shifting spanner and you again put it back on the area where the hex nut is, turning clockwise, so you're going the opposite way to taking it out, obviously. You finally get to the area where it's tight, you put a reasonable amount of pressure on, because what you do not want is when you put your tap on your head and everything on, opening your tap head and also taking that out, so you're left with your insert sticking out here and the water gushing out. Happened before and it'll happen again. We find at this stage that before we put the tap heads and everything on, with this being reasonably easy, we can turn it off with our fingers and then turn the water on. So if you've got a problem, it saves you putting all the tap heads back off again to solve the problem. We'll now go down and turn the water back on. That one's reasonably accessible, so the water should be on now. We'll turn it on with our fingers, showing you that the water is on. We'll let it run for a short while, because there might be bits of rubber washer hanging out in there. Turn it off gently. That seems fine. We'll check that the hot's still on and running, which it is. We'll turn that off. We can now look in the area of our sink. We haven't got any loose parts in there, what we should have, so we'll swivel it back. If you've got any excess water in this centre spout, just tap it out and it'll come out. This tap is now working perfectly. The brass face is fine, new washer, and is working A1. What we've now got to do is replace our cap. So it's the reverse procedure before. Your cap has got a shape inside of there which matches the little plastic top, and you have to place it onto the head. You place it onto the head, so then producing your centre screw without dropping it in the sink, hopefully, run that at finger tight as well, which usually is the case. You then can tighten this reasonably tight, not too tight, but reasonably tight. It's only holding the head on, so don't put too much pressure on it. Our plastic insert then slips into that area, as before, showing the colour of the tap and what it is. In this instance, cold. Our flick top flicks back in, and that is it basically. The tap has been serviced, greased, tap washer changed, brass face checked, and any small amounts of debris lying in that area discarded. We will turn it back on, check there's no small parts in the sink, pull the plugs out. We're not going to turn the tap on and let it run for a short while, just to make sure there is working. Turn it off gently a few times. You'll find with these brass inserts and these plastic tops, you can turn it off and just stop as it turns, and you'll find that it works perfectly. Perfectly. I could turn that another full turn if I wanted to. Some people do this. But what happens over a period of time, they put pressure on the washer, pressure on the brass insert, and therefore damage the brass insert, and what you've got to do, when you strip it down, you've got no choice, you can't rewash it, maintain it, you've got to take it to the plumbers merchants and get a new one. So it's on, remind the kids as well, and just gently off, stopping. Now, what you'll find with a lot of mixers, whether they're monoblock mixers or whether they're ordinary mixers, they all have a swivel spout. Now this swivel spout is quite often a complaint that when they turn the water on, it dribbles from this area down there and floods the top of the sink. What that is the washers inside of there, the O-rings, are wearing down and need replacing. You'll find with some mixers you'll have a small screw in the front area which you loosen off anti-clockwise, or a small screw in the back which you loosen off anti-clockwise. This mixer, what you have to do with this mixer is take it to right angles of the sink and find which end does it, because sometimes you take it that way and you can do it, and sometimes that way. I believe in this one that we are going to do it that way. You get a small flat-headed screwdriver, just work it gently in that gap, and what should happen, you should find that it all pulls out quite easily. That's your mixer, that's your spout. There's your rubber O-rings, black in this occasion. Now, this one isn't mixing, this one isn't leaking, I should say, but we have shown you where the rubber O-rings are. What you normally would do, you would take them rubber O-rings off, flick them off, slide them down the pipe and discard them and put new ones on, available at your plumbers merchants or in your supplies if you've got them. One little trick we use, sometimes when we haven't got these, on a temporary basis, not on a long-term basis, is take the rubber washers off. What's happened, they've worn down slightly. So we take the rubber washers off, and in the orifice where the rubber washers, the O-rings, stay, we take a small amount of PTFE tape, slide it off your roll, about a foot, 12 inches, double it up, and roll it like a piece of string. You then have your PTFE tape, you would then wrap it round the orifice where the O-ring sits, once, perhaps twice. Try twice, and then snap it off. It's easy snapped, it comes off dead easy. You would then, as you've got your PTFE tape in that insert, replace the existing rubber ring, which would then obviously have been built up and protrudes back to where it would be normally on a normal ring. Do that on both, and you'll find you've got two rubber rings which are protruding correctly because you've built up the area with PTFE tape. We would then suggest WD-40 onto this area, a bit Vaseline, whatever, but grease it most definitely. It is simple to put back, just checking that area there's no obstructions. You would then do it right angles to the top, get my hand out of the rod, you push down into a little locking nut and twist it round. And what you find, sometimes you really got to push down like that and click it in. Once you click it into that area, it cannot come out. It cannot really come out in that area unless you force it, but certainly in the angles that you use normally for the mixing spout between the two sinks, it cannot come out. You would then turn your hot or cold tap on to see if it's leaking, dry it off with some tissue. In this occasion it isn't leaking. It wasn't leaking before, I just took it a bit to show you what can happen. Now, we put PTFE tape on there or we put new O-rings on there. Really the choice is yours whether you want to find new O-rings. That was a little trick that we used to give you temporary, on a short-term basis, workability of the O-rings that were existing. We are now back to the mixer tap. What we have done, we'll just tidy our tools up, what we have done is we've took the tap head off, the screw, the centre screw, the spring, the plastic colour code, the brass insert completely out, showed you where the rubber washer is, how to change it, how to change the brass insert if necessary by obtaining a new one, replacing it, replacing the head, screw, such forth, and testing it by turning the motor on. Showed you that usually a little trick is not to turn it off too tight, and then you'll get a lot more service on your brass insert and will not be replacing them too often. We've also showed you how to take your spout out, which is usually a little screw in the front or back. Take it out, plugs are still in the sink when you're doing this. Clockwise, off, right angles to the tap. Sometimes very tough, pull them up. WD-40, grease that area, replace it. It will make the spout very easily to turn then if you've put some releasing oil or a little bit Vaseline or grease on that area. Check your taps are working. Off. We've now serviced the tap. We'll do both taps because we're here on site and it will cost no more money to do both than it would to do one. We turn the water on, show the customer, who I'm sure would be happy. You yourself would be more than happy because you'd be able to stand back and say, I've done it. It's cost nothing. The most it's cost is 2 10-pence washers, a little bit PTFE tape, a little bit releasing oil, and just purely a little bit forethought, knowledge, and watching the video, you can do this yourself. We seem to have completed this job, showed you a little few tricks, how to do it. We are now going to move on to our second small job and show you a few more tricks with a tap, a slightly different tap, with a pattern gland, maintainable British standard, and we will now gather our tools and move on to that area. Right, we are now in a different position in the house, and the customer is again complaining on 2 points. Her tap drips intermittently, which suggests that the tap washer may be gone, or the brass face, as I mentioned on the previous small job. And also what she has is, when she opens the tap, is a dripping coming from this area here and down the tap, which then floods this area. We're basically going to do the change of the tap washer first, and then we're going to investigate the drip. This is a gold plated tap, as you can see. A modern concept of an older type, Victorian tap if you want to say, but it is a modern tap, it is a modern basin, and hasn't been in too long. So we'll go on the first stage, which is always put your plug in the sink. There's the plug, and there's the sink. Now we've turned the water off again downstairs and explained to the lady that it will be off for a certain period of time. With it being gold, with a shift and spanner on a tap, you can create no problems. And with this being a single tap, we recommend that once you have your shift and spanner in position on the tap, that with it being a single tap, putting weight on that to turn anti-clockwise, you can turn the whole tap and disengage the pipework underneath and cause a leak underneath, which is more problems. So what we do, we get a nice reasonable cloth, put it on the gold head, and then we have our adjustable gas pliers, as we call them. Adjust them slightly open a bit more, grip the gold head, so you grip in the opposite direction to what you're going to turn. We are now going to turn the tap to take the whole insert out, and in this instance it isn't too tight, it's fairly slack. We are turning anti-clockwise to take the tap out. We now know that that tap is reasonably slack, so we can disengage our shifting spanner, take our cloth off, keep the cloth there for future reference, which I know we will need in the near future. We then continue to take the tap head completely out of its socket. Now as you can see, this is a completely different tap to the one downstairs in the kitchen. It is what I call a maintainable packing gland, head and insert. You've got the same type of rubber washer on the bottom, slightly in a different connection. It has not got the small nut on the bottom. This is just purely a flick on and flick off type of top. We are going to gently take our finger into the hole of the top again, make sure there's no bits of rubber, wash or anything in that area. The top in itself, our e.g. the top washer, small flathead screwdriver, and without pressing too hard you can take the top washer off reasonably easily. Now if I'd had some practice on this instead of not being a plumber for 30 years, I might have done that a little bit better. So you've got your top washer, you've got your tap, and it is just a push fit. Brass face is clean. We will now discard the top washer, get a new one out of your supply, check that it's the right size. What you'll find sometimes, very rare, but you'll find it sometimes, that when you put the top washer on, it's slightly bigger than the brass face, therefore obviously at that moment in time it is no good. So what you do, if it's slightly bigger, sharp pair of scissors, trim around the edge, fairly easy. It mightn't be perfectly round, but it will be perfectly adequate to do the job. Now you've got your top washer on, what we're about to do is put the whole top back in. You'll find in some instances, and especially on the cold, that this is loose, what we call a loose jumper. This is a jumper part. If it is loose, just make sure you've got it in as you insert it squarely, or on the other hand you can take the insert out and pop it in the orifice first and then guide the top onto that. Making sure that you've still got your little rubber washer as a gasket on the edge of the top. If the rubber washer for some reason has worn down in the future, then basically you can form one with the PTFE tape as we showed you before. The PTFE tape, if the washer has gone, this is one of the tricks that we use it for. You take a section off about 18 inches long, we double it again, and we just gently rub it together as in a piece of rope. Once you get it rubbed together, you actually hold your tab and you form the washer yourself. Once you've formed the washer, don't worry about the jagged ends sticking out, because as you tighten the top in, you can snap them off, cut them off with a scissor or anything. In this instance I don't need it, so I'm not going to really leave it on. I'm just showing you for future reference. We've got the black washer there, which is not necessary if you've got PTFE tape, so you don't have to go chasing around various outlets just for that washer. But rest assured, if you haven't got any kind of washer on there, either PTFE tape, which is what we showed you a few seconds ago, or the black rubber washer, it will certainly leak. So you drop your top back in to the area of the threads, and again stressing clockwise for tightening, we turn it gently into position. Now this one is going up nearly all the way by hand. We're going to finish that off by putting the cloth back on the gold tap and doing a reverse procedure of what we did before. We hold the tap head on the cloth, or you will scratch your chrome, you will scratch your brass, and we're going to tighten that reasonably tight. Not too tight, but you'll find its own level. Because if it isn't tight enough, obviously when you turn the tap on, if you turn the tap too hard, your whole head would come off. Now you can see that the tap is slightly moved in this instance, hopefully not to cause any problems. We now disengage the shifting spanner, the cloth and the tools. At this stage we would turn the water on and test the tap washer. But as the customer has complained about dripping down from the top of a tap, bearing in mind that some taps have a cover on this, most taps have a cover on this, and you don't see this end, this part. So to get that cover off, you actually take the top head off, which will have a screw in the side, which you loosen out, knock your head off. It'll have a screw in the centre, which this one has, where you screw the top off, take the centre screw out with a cross-headed screwdriver and take your top off. Then the cover with adjustable wrench. I'll do this as though there's a cover there. You grip your main cover, which is about that distance, anti-clockwise, and your cover turns off. And then what you've got is no tap head, no cover, and you're seeing exactly what you see now. Now, I would stress all the time when there is water dripping down here, it's what we call in the trade the packing gland, which is e.g. that area there where the spindle of the tap goes down into the insert of the tap. Again, it's got a hex nut on, and what we're going to do, we're going to open the tap fully, which it already is. We're going to adjust the spanner to fit that hex nut. Now, you'll find that tightening that a little bit will probably stop your little dripping for a while, a few weeks, a few days. That's not the correct job. The correct job is to loosen the nut. Again, if it's tight, a bit WD-40, a bit releasing oil, 5 or 10 minutes, and you'll find you'll either turn it off with a spanner most of the way, or what you will do, you'll turn it off slack. You raise it above the area that you're going to work on. If the tap head isn't on, then obviously that will slide off as well. Don't forget that your plug's in the sink, and therefore anything that drops is retrievable. In this instance, we haven't taken the head off, we've just raised what we call the packing nut from the packing gland. That area there, which is the hole, is what they call a packing gland. The manufacturer puts a packing in there. It's like a piece of string actually, in layman's terms. And what it does, it stops the water, as you're turning the spindle of the tap down there, it stops the water leaking back up through here. It wears down over the years, through constant turning, through heat, whatever. And what you have to do is sometimes you'll find that there's the old bits is in there when you do it. So you just rake the old bits out, clear it out, make sure you've got a clean area down there. And again, we're back to the PTFE tape. You take some PTFE tape off again, I would say about a foot, 12 inches, double it up. What we're going to do now is we're going to wrap it around that area. Now this is not going to be tight, this is just going to be laid in. Now you gently take it around that area. This is above the hole, not in the hole, it's between the packing nut and the orifice. You wrap it round gently and you bring that down to tuck it in. Now you can tuck that in fairly easy on a tap where the packing gland has gone. In this instance the packing gland is very, very little. It is a fairly new tap and it is in good condition, so we're going to tuck it in with just one wrapping round. Don't forget that this can be cut off at a later date. Never try and pull it off in this instance or you'll pull it all out of the packing gland. We've got the packing gland nut started once again, so therefore we retrieve our shifting spanner, which is adjusted to suit the nut. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. You're then able to bring this nut down and tighten it. You tighten it enough just to put a little bit of pressure on it. What you'll find is the tighter you tighten that packing gland nut, the tighter it makes to turn this tap off and on. So I find that if you get a movement on the tap which is fairly slack, it means you can therefore produce another bit pressure actually onto the shifting spanner, as I'm doing now. Now that's fairly tight, and sometimes what you find with these shifting spanners, they don't want to leave the job. This one has. You've got the area of PTFE tape which is hanging off, you just snap it off. It comes off fairly easy. We've now done a new tap washer, checked the brass face, we've done a packing gland, stopped the leak running down the edge of the tap, which is always your problem when you see it coming out the bottom of your tap. It's never your tap washer, it's always your packing gland. And it hasn't taken very long. Basically, this same job again, coming out solely for this, can cost a fair bit of money. We've done it fairly simply, and a lot of people wouldn't tackle that because they would be very unsure what the situation of the leak was and how to go about it. We've progressed to show you how to do it, and you'll find most valves, taps, stopcocks have got this packing gland on, and if you get a little leak from it, try and give it a little nip, as I said before. It might just need that. If it doesn't, then you loosen it down, shut your mains off, your water off, and repack it with PTFE tape. Not too much. You'll find you've put too much in if you bring your packing gland nut down and it doesn't catch the thread to start again. So what you've got to do is you wrap it round, back off a full circle, try again, try again. As long as you've got at least 1 to 2 times the circumference of that hole in there as a packing, that'll suffice you quite easily. We're now back to a situation where the tap was in the first place. Packing gland is hopefully repaired, tap washer is hopefully repaired. We're going to turn the water on by going downstairs and turning the stopcock off. Be a few seconds and we'll have water coming back up to this area. As I said before, we clear up the mess carefully. Always try and keep a tidy job. If you keep a tidy job, you know where your tools are, you know where your materials are, and you've got nobody complaining that you left. Water's coming through now. We've got water coming through. We'll check in the basin we've left no parts, no rubbish, and we'll take the plug out. The plug comes out and the water runs away. We now gently turn the tap off, and we find that the tap washer seems to be working fine. I'll let it run again in case there's any rubbish in. Let it run fairly fast. If there's bits of rubbish in of any description, then it will come off. Just like your tap head. Always remember, with your tap head, you turn it anti-clockwise to come on and clockwise off, and you'll find that all British Standard nuts are right hand thread. It's anti-clockwise to slacken, clockwise to tighten. Now the packing gland will only leak when the tap is working, if it is going to leak. In this instance, we'll dry it off a little bit and we find what we've done is a perfect job and should last a few years, if not longer, for the customer to repair. This job was fairly easy and it gives you an insight into 2 different types of taps. One where you've got it protected, it's gold, it's chromium, it's gold plated. One that's got a packing gland, British Standard that we repaired, and one's got a similar type of washer but on a different connection point. They're all the same principle, and I'm sure with a bit forethought, the right tools, and the advantage of watching this video as many times as you like, you'll be able to carry out this small work in your leisure. We are now going to move on to another small main and 10-inch job, which I'm sure if you follow us will open your eyes to more easiness in the plumbing industry. Downstairs to a wash basin which is persistently blocking up, e.g. with hairs, other types of rubbish, soap residue, materials like that. As you can see at this moment in time, it's slightly blocked up up to overflow level. Before I start to show you an easy way to do these without a complicated system, going back to the original taps, I mentioned upstairs that some taps have got covers on. Well, what we find, for instance, in this basin is a different type of tap with the cover on that we mentioned before. Basically, I'll just show you that the cover does come off fairly easy, and then we'll carry on with the block sink, which I am going to show you. So, with this type of tap, it's a flick switch again, which the top comes off. You've got a centre screw which you loosen right out, totally, which I've already done, and your top head comes off. Now, as you can see, this is an older type of tap, been in use quite a while, and it's pretty concentrated up. But you've got the same type of insert in there, which you had in the original tap. This one hasn't got a packing gland. It is like the first tap we showed you in the kitchen sink. It's a total insert which you again screw out anti-clockwise, hold on the tap as it's an individual tap and not a mixer, the opposite way with the cloth on, so you don't turn the pipework underneath the sink. As you take it out, you do exactly the same as the first video. Change the washer, change the whole insert if you require. Sometimes it's easier that way if it's a fair age. WD-40 spray it, replace it, tighten it in the opposite direction what we want. Put your cover on, find the little grip that it covers, put it on, tighten your screw back, which usually is fairly easy, and then slip your cover back on. Turn your water back on and test your job. We're not doing this tap, this was really just to show you that there is various types of taps. That one is the one with the cover. What we come down to do today is, as you can see, quite often they call out for a plumber. Block sink, a block tile, which we'll show you later on. A little trick about this, you don't have to disengage the pipes, the traps, unless it's really bad. If you've got a plastic bottle trap under there, then you can disconnect the bottom of the bottle trap, take it out, clean it and put it back. You'll find a lot of times that you've got an overflow in your wash basin, which is cast in with the basin. That is cast in and joins the chrome waste, which the plumber has inserted when he's done the basin, and then goes away to the main drains. You'll find that a lot of people, when they've got a block sink, they've got a cup plunger. Some go a bit more advanced and they buy what I'm about to show you in a minute, but even so, when they've got that, they find they're going totally the wrong way about doing the job and will never succeed. Firstly, what you should find is that you should fill the sink, if it isn't blocked too well, to your overflow level. Turn your tap on and let your water run down your overflow. Another little trick for future reference with wash basins, you'll find a lot of bathrooms have a foisty smell, a drainy smell, a seweragey smell, and people have a hard job finding it. 9 times out of 10, you'll find it's within your overflow down there. It's blocked up, or it's just got a bit of grease and dirt over the years, and that's what's smelling up. So what I normally suggest is squirt a Domestos toilet cleaner, squeezy even, very liquid, Excel, it's good stuff that. Down there, let it lie for a while, fill your sink with hot water, and let the hot water run down there. You'll find your overflow will work, like it is now. It'll clean the overflow out and stop the smell. E.g. in your bath, other wash basin, sinking with all the same problem. That is another little, not a trick, it's just a short way of doing something and finding that what you've got is rid of the nasty smell. Fairly inexpensive way of doing it. We are now going to concentrate on the block sink. We have a block sink at this moment in time, and as I said before, if you use a cup plunger or they go a bit more advanced and buy a pump action blocker, which we are going to use in a minute, a lot of people pump away, plunge, and find they get nowhere. Basically, the simple reason for that is they've got no pressure behind it, and they're not blowing down on the drain, they're blowing the excess pressure back up the overflow. As I said before, this overflow always joins that waste. So therefore, if you're pushing down on that waste there, hopefully you're thinking, I'm going to clear the blockage. What you're doing is pumping all the air, not down the drain, down the U-bend and out through the drain, you're putting it back through here. So therefore you're wasting your energy, your time, and whatever else. So first of all, I would suggest in this instance that we take some kitchen roll, toilet roll, whatever. Try and form it to a similar shape to the overflow, and what we're going to do is simply block that off. Don't push it too far, you don't want to lose it inside. An old sponge, cloth, anything you want, just as long as it blocks up. If you find you're too hard, then somebody can give you a hand. Then get a cloth and just tell them to put their hand over that and block that. We then fill the sink up to overflow level, I would say. You'll find that it's not running away. So I use personally, it's a bit fair wear and tear on this one. It's lasted us quite a while, but it does the job. What you've got is a plunger which retrieves and fills up with water and pushes a jet of water out of there down your drain. It concentrates on the drain and it is far, far superior to the plunger. And you'll find you can buy one of these, a bit better condition this admittedly, from the region of £6 or £7 from a good builder's merchant. I'll stand up now because I'm going to try and put a bit of pressure on it. We desperately want to plunge this. We pull it up and fill it full of water. We then take the plug out if necessary, cover the outlet hole. What we haven't done at this moment in time, we've blocked the overflow We then plunge the water back and forward. You can hear it squirting down the drain. And what you're doing is putting all the pressure on the main drain, the U-bend, and out to the sink. I would do at least anywhere between 6 and 10 plunges and take it off. You will find that most times, e.g. like this, it is running away fairly easily. I would let that run away and make sure it is running away correctly. And then I'd fill up again. You can put the plug in, just put your plunger on the top again. Hot water preferably. Add a little bit of squeeze as you go, a bit of disinfectant, whatever you want to do. We're now not going to fill it as far as the overflow. We're going to give it at least 5 plunges, if not more. So, take the plunger off, and that is perfect. Perfection. There's only probably a few hairs, a bit soap, a bit residue that's built up over the last few months, years, whatever. You'll find that most sinks, a good way of testing that they are reasonably clear, is run a tap at full pressure. If it runs away and doesn't backfill, e.g. like this one is doing now, you get no backfilling, it is not even filling the area of the waste hole, it is continually running. That is an A1 sign that your sink, your trap and your drain is clear. At this moment in time you can then dislodge your block paper, sponge, cloth from your overflow hole and discard it. We're going to do 1 or 2 tests on the sink just to make sure we're correct by running the hot water and filling it up. We'll put the plunger back across there for the time being and we'll fill the sink. Again, as it's filling, just rub around a little bit of dirt on the sink taps like dirt. Pick up your tools, keep everything nice and tidy. I know it's your own house and you're doing your own job, but like I said before, keep it tidy. Just guard the sponge, tools away back in your toolbox. And now we're going to test the overflow again. The overflow should, as we get to the level of the overflow, should run continuously without rising above it. If it rises above it, on a full bore tap, then it is slightly blocked. You can, and has been known, for to produce your plunger onto the overflow like that and pump the water that way. Certainly works. As you can see, the overflow is now running away 100%, and if that tap was accidentally left on, then it wouldn't overspill into the bathroom area, which is usually upstairs, and flood the whole house. Kids have done this before. Create a lot of havoc. Water can. We've checked that the overflow is perfect, so now I'm going to turn the tap off, take the plug out the sink, and you'll get the telltale signs of the little whirlpool at the end, the gurgle, and run away, and we then know that this block sink is perfect. We'll do a block drain later on, perhaps another block sink. You can see there's a little whirlpool down there, and that is the A1 sign. Wow, listen to that noise. That is perfection. At this moment in time, wash basins can, not in domestic circumstances, very rarely, you can have 2 wash basins, a bath, all attached to the same waste system. If you find that the end product, e.g. a bath, is blocked, obviously it follows on that your 2 sinks will be blocked as well. So it's no good producing your pressure at your last sink, your middle sink. You've got to produce your pressure at your bath. So therefore what I would suggest is that you do exactly the same as I've told you here. In the bath, if it's going to overflow, block the overflow off. If it hasn't, well and good. But what you've got to do to get the pressure pumping down your drain from your first item, which is the bath, and not back up here, is to put your plug in here, fill the sink up, block your overflow off and the basin or the 2 basins, and then pump. If you find that the force of the pump, the drain pump, which is e.g. that one, as I said before, easy board, pushes the plugs up on this and not down the main drain, I'm sure you'll have somebody who can just keep the finger on the plug. You clear the drain, take your blockages out and you're back to normal. You'll find most wash basins, as I said before, I've got a U-bend bottle trap behind them, easy accessible. Wouldn't recommend it unless it was absolutely necessary, because sometimes they're difficult to put back, even for a tradesman like myself. I can guarantee 99% of blockages you clear fairly easy with that one item which you can buy for less than £10, and doing it the way I've shown you now, blocking your overflow. Never try to clear a blocked sink, wash basin, bath, anything, if it's going to overflow, without blocking it off. You're wasting your time, you're wasting your energy, and obviously time and money. We're now going to carry on to the next small item, which I'm sure you will enjoy as much as the rest, and hopefully you will learn from the next item as well. Right, we'll pick our tools up and clear out, and we'll now give the lady the bill, which hopefully will be a written invoice for a fair amount of money. I'm not going to say how much, but obviously rates are variable between different contractors. On buying this video, I keep stressing as I'm doing this, it'll cost you nothing, just a little bit of your effort, sometimes a cut little finger like I've done, but definitely no money, and keep the costs down. This is the whole idea of me trying to show you the easy ways of doing small jobs. Right, we're going to pick our tools up and leave the bathroom now. This small job, which we're about to show you, is a common problem. It's common within the plumbing industry, and I'm sure it's common within the customer yourself. It is a blocked WC pan. These seem to be quite complicated to customers, because when I visit the houses to do the blockage, they've attempted all kinds. They've put bleach down, they've put domestos down, they've got wire coat hangers down, everything trying to unblock the WC pan. I'm going to show you the correct way and the easy way. Most blockages in WC pans are usually in the pan outlet itself, in what we call the U-bend. They're a toilet roll, the cardboard of a toilet roll, various items, but they're nearly always associated in the toilet pan. If they're associated in the main drains, you will also have other blockages in the house. So in this instance, it is the toilet pan, because it is the only toilet pan that is blocked. We are now going to show you how to attempt and remedy a blocked toilet pan fairly easy. We carry another tool in our toolkit for small jobs like this, and it is what we call a 6-inch handheld plunger. Again, can be bought from most builders merchants. It is 6 inches across the diameter. It is black rubber on a wooden shank with a handle on the top. Not commonly bought in DIY shops, but certainly in a good builder's merchant. This is a must for this job. Well worth the investment if you have a lot of blockages in various other places as well, which we will show you later on. I am now going to show you the blocked WC pan and how to remedy it. We've come to the customer's house and she tells us that it is blocked. First of all, a lot of people would, whatever they were trying to do, would attempt to plunge it again in this area, even if they didn't have this 6-inch plunger or whatever. A must with a toilet pan, if the water is at a low level, flush it to see if it's blocked. Let the water fill right up to the rim, and then when it's full to the rim and stop flushing, you then exert the pressure with a 6-inch plunger blocking the pan numerous times, up and down, at least a dozen times. You will find, again, 90% of times after doing this for a fair few times, take it away, wow, from this
occasion, we'll clear the blockage straight away. If it doesn't run away after the first attempt, will the system fills up and attempt it again. I can guarantee that if your blockage is within the pan and of the usual items, this unit, the 6-inch plunger, and by flushing the system, filling the pan and exerting the pressure when the pan is full of water, sometimes smelly water, depending on what the blockage is. It's your house. You will attempt it very easily. Put your plunger in, let the pan fill up full of water, and again, when it's full, pressure down. You're pushing right on the whole 4-inch outlet of the pan on the rubbish, and the rubbish is flushed away down your main sewer, and your main sewers are of a larger volume, therefore can take the disintegrated rubbish that you pulled away. You then take your plunger out the pan, depending on the condition of the plunger. If it is mucky, dirty, seweragey, flush it a couple of times to clean, and then you would take that outside, through an outside tap, disinfect it and clean it. We are quite confident that that is clear, but obviously what we would do, again on this occasion, is flush the system numerous times to make sure. Then we would put some toilet roll in, quite more excessively than you would probably use within the toilet. We wait till the system's filled and we watch that toilet paper flush away 100% with a perfect job. It was just about to fill, so we'll flush it. It's away, it's flushed away, and I can assure you there is no blockage within that WC pan. While we are here, within this WC suite, I'll show you a small trick that plumbers use, e.g. within the system. We'll put the lid down and we'll take the system lid off. Quite easily on this occasion. It's very china and it just lifts off. You will find sometimes these are plastic, you've got a centre screw in, you take the centre screw, a plastic lid lifts off, or sometimes a plastic lid just clips on it and clips off. Within the system, you always have the same items. A handle, a siphon, and a ball valve. Ball valves are sometimes plastic, sometimes brass. On this occasion it's plastic, but what you always have, and should have, is an overflow pipe, an emergency outlet, which comes out the toilet system and goes outside, and you will often see a little pipe sticking outside your house through the walls, the side of the house, the back of the house usually, and that is the emergency outlet. The reason for the emergency outlet is if your ball valve malfunctions, the washer goes, whatever, and the system overfills, it's not going to overflow and come over the top of here, flood the house, it's going to go out the emergency house. We suggest that now and then in all systems that you check your overflows to make sure they're still working, not blocked, and certainly not leaking on the bend that's usually under there. What you do find, if these haven't been used for 10, 15, a lot of years, because obviously you haven't had a problem with the system, you get all sorts crawling up from the outside, beetles, spiders, wasps, whatever. Sometimes a lot of them die in that instance. And that hole in the overflow, which comes up into the system, is directly from outside. So you're getting the smell from the outside, from the rubbish in the pipe, up through this overflow. You come into your toilet area, you get a smell which is abnormal. You put your bleach, you put your disinfectant down the pan, and you've still got a smell. You'll find by doing this once or twice a year, more if you want to, you'll eradicate any smell that comes through your overflow. So you've got your overflow, the water level is about an inch below, and we're about to test to see if the overflow works, leaks, and does its job, and also clean out any rubbish. We're going to press the ball down to create more water than is normal. It is coming up to the level of the overflow, and it is now running down the overflow pipe. If we had a leak, it would show itself underneath,
Again, no water, no leaks. We will fill it fairly high as possible, quickly, and we'll take our hands off the overflow, off the bowl. The water is running down the overflow, presumably running out the pipe outside. We could check that by going downstairs and verifying it, but the customer has just told me that the water is running outside. The other point while we are here, you could also put a squeeze of domestos down there, some squeezy, some toilet cleaner, whatever, just let it run down there. To get your level back to normal after you've checked that and made sure it is working, just flush the system. The system will then clear itself. The ball valve will bring the level of the water in the system up to its normal level within a few minutes, and you've solved possibly a little problem which you might know has been there quite a while and obviously not known where the smell was coming from. There's a ball valve, plastic ball valve in here. We are going to delve into that and another small job within this video of how to maintain, change the washer and maintain and fit a new ball valve if necessary. These are all jobs which cost money and all jobs which tradesmen come out find fairly easy within their capabilities, with their experience and professional shortcuts. The system is filling up. We just check that it's going to fill back to the same level. You'll find on all systems there's a line on the back of the system. Sometimes it's covered in dirt if it's fairly, so just give the back a rub. You'll see the line, and it's usually a 2 gallon flush. You bring your bowl, your level up to that line. If it's slightly above there, don't worry, as long as it's at least an inch below your overflow level. The adjustment on this ball valve to get the ball valve level of water up and down is a small screw on there. We'll show you that later on. All we're worried about at this moment in time is that the water comes up to the line and stops, which it has done. It's up to the line, it's stopped. So we're now going to put the lid back. We've cleared the main blockage with, again, our 6-inch plunger on a wood shaft with a handle, available at most builders' merchants. Very handy to keep around the house for all block drains and such forth. We've showed you how to adjust your water level, test your overflow, make sure there's no leaks, and clear any rubbish residue within that overflow that might be smelling back up into this area. We are now happy in this situation of leaving this job, and we are now going to move on to our next small job. This small job we're about to show you, again, is quite a common problem. It's a radiator valve, e.g. the on and off valve to a radiator, leaking, running down the valve and onto the carpet or the floor covering, whatever you have. Sometimes you don't realise this is happening until someone comes along in their stocking feet or wherever and the carpet is soaking wet. Anyway, we're going to carry on. I'm going to show you how to strip down this type of valve and replace the necessary washers. This type of valve, in this instance, is an older type and is called a bell mount valve. It is written on the top of the valve. So we'll show you the valve. This is the radiator and this is the valve in question. We'll take the head off and we'll be able to show you quite clearly. It has got a cross-headed screw on the top. You screw the screw out and your head comes off. Take the screw out, put it on the windowsill. It is a bell mount valve and it is written on the top of the valve. Nowadays you'll find that the same type of valve, and what we are doing now, is called Terrier on there, as in terrier dog. T-E-R-R-I-E-R. This is Belmont, an older fashion, but the original B-E-L-M-O-N-T, Belmont. You can only do this type of job with this type of valve. So we'll carry on. We've took the head off. And what you see is a rusty valve which has been leaking for a considerable time and is running down the pipework. There is a little brass insert which is the shape of the spindle and holds the head on. That is a separate item, so we take that off. Now this has got a packing gland nut in the top which we are about to loosen and comes off fairly easily. We are again using the same tools as we used in the other jobs.
the water is actually pouring out of here, so we've got to be very careful. We've put a newspaper down. I'm about to put a towel down in that area as well to preserve and help the water for the period of time that we're doing the job. You take the packing gland, as you've took the head of the valve off, you've got the spindle free, you take the packing gland nut out and slide it right off. It is pretty hot because the radiator's hot. The heating's on, but we can't afford to wait for 2 hours for the heating to cool, so we're doing it. What we've got here is the spindle as you had in your taps, upright. Now this is the only time within this video I'm going to tell you to turn the opposite way to get it out, e.g. this is a left hand thread. So to release this whole insert, you turn clockwise. Clockwise until there's a little shut-off valve inside of there, and you take the whole spindle out of this bell mount valve, and it usually shuts off reasonably. This one is passing a little bit, so we'll be fairly quick. Within this insert you have two little O-rings. Now the O-rings are old, brittle, and that's what happens. The heat of the O-ring snaps and wears down. We've got new O-rings which we are going to put on. There's 2 of them. You slip them over and you put them on. But what I'm trying to tell you, a little trick, in the event of the O-rings not being too brittle, you put your little screwdriver underneath them, you prise them off one at a time, slide them down the pipe, and you should have 2 rings which are not split and will be shaped round, small. Now you will find, because you've taken them off and they've weighed down, the valve's leaking, that the O-rings are no good in the sense of being individual O-rings to shut the valve off. So a little trick we use is we get our PTFE tape. Again, we take about 12 inches off, we double it up, and what I find in the past is a good way of using the old O-rings as a temporary measure, which can last a long time, is go around the orifice where the O-ring is going to be placed at least once, if not twice, and snap your PTFE tape off, which comes off reasonably easy. Sometimes it's tough. You then put your O-ring over the top of the PTFE tape. So what's happened is that the PTFE tape has built the area up, so when you put the O-ring on, the O-ring is now, as it was in the first place, up against the brass face, and when you put it back into the radiator valve, it will act in a normal way. In this instance we don't need the PTFE tape because we've got 2 new O-rings. The O-rings, and that's what they call them whenever you attempt to buy these, will slip over the valve fairly easy. They will then slip into the orifice. One's on, quite simply. You can put that one on that way or that way, whichever you prefer. They slide over the pipe and they fit back into the existing holes where they were. You just rub your fingers around, make sure there's nothing obstructing. So what you've got is the insert, which has come out on a left hand thread, that is clockwise to take out, anti-clockwise to put in. You've put 2 new O-rings on, so now what we are going to do, I'll show you this valve and this procedure on a workbench away from the site later on and strip it down. You place it back into the centre of your hole, you get a little squirt of water, don't worry, this is what happens. You then turn it anti-clockwise to tighten down, and you can do that nearly all the way with your fingers, and then carry on with your gas pliers. That is in. As you can see, I can dry that off now. The water has actually stopped before I put anything else back together again. The job is done there. Finished, that's it, simple as that. That is replacing O-rings on a bell mount old valve or a Terrier new valve. Exactly the same, both valves. If you've got a cheaper kind of radiator valve, I'm afraid you can't do this to them. You've literally got to disconnect the radiator valve, throw it away, discard it, and put a new valve in. So it's really better, and I always do, and I always stress to customers to pay that little bit extra for a quality valve when you install something and you can put it in, which is maintainable and can last 25, 30 years, if not more. We've now replaced the O-rings But before I go further ahead, another little trick I can show you. If you decide, as we are stripping it to bits, that you did not want to venture to take the spindle and the insert right out, you can revert back to the procedure which I showed you before, where we had a packing gland and an orifice. This is a temporary measure as well, which plumbers often do. Not recommended on a long-term basis, but certainly on a short-term basis. Again, you've got the packing gland, which is slid off the hole. You've got the packing gland in your hand. You then get a little bit of PTFE tape, 12 inches, double it up again, do it like a piece of string, and you can wrap it round the spindle very slackly, very slackly, as regards above the hole. You then get your packing gland and you gently push the PAF tape into the orifice and tighten the packing gland down. Now that also would stop the leak. It is not the correct procedure with this valve, but it would do on a temporary basis. A little shortcut, professional shortcut, and a temporary measure, which can last days, weeks, months, years. In this instance, we replaced the O-rings, we've put that back. That is perfect. There's not a drop of water, it's not leaking, and that will last at least another 10 years, if not longer. We'll find, if you find that your packing gland nut is tight as you retrieve it up the spindle, bit steel wool, rub it round, and this is the point where I recommend a little bit WD-40, squeeze it on as a lubricant, then get your packing gland nut, bring it down into the orifice, tighten it manually as far as you can, and then with your little shifting spanner, you don't need any spanners in the opposite direction because you're not putting a great deal of pressure on. What you're doing is tightening the packing gland nut. If the shifting spanner has stopped adjusting itself, you're tightening it really down, and this is a job which is necessary from time to time because basically, as I said before, they're rubber washers, fair wear and tear, heat, they harden up and disintegrate. Now you tighten that with a reasonable pressure, not too much, dry it off again, make sure you've got no leaks. Gas pliers onto the spindle as though you've got your head on, and open the valve fully to make the radiator work, which is anti-clockwise now. The valve is fully open and you have no leaks. Again, a perfect job. Looks a little bit rusty, it's brass, but the valve is working perfectly now. It's been lubricated, serviced, O-rings changed, and there isn't the slightest drop of water, slightest leak. The simple parts are now going to happen. You're going to slip this little brass collar over the top of the spindle. It's flat headed on one, so you put it to the shape of the flat head, you drop it on, fairly easy like that. Your actual head, then it's got the flat head inside. You put your head to suit the spindle and the part you've just put on. You then put your centre screw back with the crosshead screw, tighten the crosshead screw, and what you have now is a valve that is functioning off, on, off, on. Not a leak, not a drop of water. Again, tidy up your bit PTFE tape, your bit mess as we're going along. Put the O-rings back in the packet. By the way, you can buy these O-rings in different colours. You tend to find that they're green for the modern Terrier valves. If your valves are, say, over 10 years old and they're Belmont, you will then ask for the red ones. In this instance, I find that both do the job for a period of time. They're not too expensive, these, and you buy them in packs of 10s, 20s, 50s, 100s at a local plumber's merchant. O-rings for the Belmont radiator valve replacement, as it states on there. We are now going to attempt to turn the valve off and on and make sure it is still not leaking. We'll tidy the tools up. We'll take the towel away, which is fairly wet. We'll take the paper away, which is actually drenched. But what we have done, we've saved the carpet getting wet at all. If you feel that you're unsure about doing this job with the floor covering there, then I'm sure simplicity itself, you can take the carpet out the way altogether and all you will wet is your floor, which will dry fairly easy. You can get a piece of plastic, waterproof, whatever you want. The covering, I will leave entirely up to you. The job I've showed you. Again, I'll repeat myself. Most of these taps, stopcocks and valves, I will show you on a short period of the video later on a workbench, not on site, and I can show you the internals, how to strip them apart. That's a bell mount valve. The modern concept that is a Terrier valve. We've now replaced the washers and done that. A fairly costly job, a call out. You don't have to drain the whole central heating system down to do these. You can do them within a short period of time. And again, it's something you can stand back and say, I've done that, I'm happy, that's working. If you've got average of 8 radiators in your house, you'll have 16 of these. There's 16 to do. You should do them within half a day, 16, no problem at all. If you feel like draining your central heating system and you're quite capable, then you've got no worries about water coming in the wall, and you can do the 16 O-rings. Good quality valve. Even that looks dirty and old, but it is a good valve. It's working well, it's lubricated, and we've done the job. Again, I'll stress the O-rings. You can buy at a good plumber's merchants. Green for the modern valve, red for the older type valve, and not very expensive. We are now going to move on, because this job is now completely satisfactory and the customer is happy. If she's got any other valves that she's unsure about, we will do them at the same time and keep the cost down, because we're on site. We're now going to move on to our next small job, and hopefully you've understood that perfectly and you're quite capable of changing O-rings and servicing a Belmont or Terrier radiator valve. What I'm about to show you now is a few of the items we've been through on site, a few of the items we haven't been through, but on the workbench. Close up, easy to see. Quickly go over them again, put them to one side and carry on. Just to give you a slight insight into the valve when it is not on site. So we'll go down to our first one, which is the Belmont valve, and we'll show you quickly how to strip the part again and what's inside. We come down to the valve, and we're showing you a Belmont valve. If you remember when we changed the valve washers, it was on site, it was leaking, it was pouring out. In this instance, on the workbench, it's not. So simplicity itself. First of all, we take a cross-headed screw out, loosen it out, take the rest out with our fingers, and it comes out. If you remember, your head came off fairly easily and put to one side. There is the brass oblong piece I was trying to explain to you before. It is oblong internally and shapes to suit the spindle. The packing gland is now fairly loose, so we'll take it off and slide it up the spindle, put it to one side. That's the packing gland nut. Now what you've got is your insert into your Belmont or Terrier valve. This is fairly tight, so we'll turn it off, and remember it's clockwise to turn it off. The only time I'll show you clockwise. It's a left-hand thread. So it's right out of the valve, and it pops up and shuts off a little valve inside of there and stops the water coming through. Therefore you should have no water trickling out of there at all, and no need to drain your system. You then got your Belmont valve insert, your spindle. You can see the two O-rings, rubber. Obviously they are in very good condition because this valve is a good valve. We're not going to change them, but if you remember correctly, you flick them off, clean the surface, put two new ones back on. Once you've put them on, into your orifice of your valve, anti-clockwise, until such time as it stops and you know it's right in the seating. You then bring your packing gland nut up, drop it over the spindle and tighten it down. What the packing gland nut does in this instance is stop you accidentally turning the spindle when the head is on right out so the water leaks. Your head, brass nut which helps the head to stay on. Then you look at your spindle, shape of your head, and drop it on. Inside your plastic head you've got the same shape as that, so you find that and then you drop that on. Your screw comes back, centre fold, and tightens up. Simple as that. That is your Pegler, Belmont or Terrier valve. We'll put that to one side. We're going to introduce a chrome tap. Single one, hot because it has got the red colour code. Basically, this is in a situation where it would be in a sink unit or a sink. Top off, centre screw, again cross-headed, right out the centre. In this instance again, and I keep using that word for some strange reason, your colour code and your screw come out in one section. Your head then should just pull off. If not, if it's a bit difficult, just slightly tap underneath and you'll find it'll come off. You're then left with your brass insert, which is into the top. We are going to take this brass insert out, which is already loose. This comes right out of your tap insert and leaves you with your spindle, insert, washer, the total working mechanism of the tap. This is the item where, if it's really damaged, you discard it, go and buy a new one and place it in. Always remember taking the old one with you to your plumber's merchants and saying, that's the type I want, that's the head, and that's what fits my head of the tap. Your washer's on the end rubber, brand new in this instance, with the locking nut. Locking nut off, change the washer, WD-40 a little bit as it's opened, run it up and down, back and forward, get it free, and then replace it into the tap. Drop it into the tap. Bear in mind you've got the black rubber washer to seal it against the tap. If not, you make your own washer with a PTFE tape. You drop it in, a bit pressure, tighten that, head back on, centre screw in this instance and colour code at the same time, dropped in the centre with the disc on top. That's just a refresher on your taps. We put that to one side and we'll introduce you to what we term as a thermostatic radiator valve. Now what this does is exactly the same as your Pegler's valve. You can get these in chrome as well if you wish, or brass. Your Pegler's valve, the one on my left, gives you the option of off or on. Nothing in between. The radiator is red hot or the radiator is cold. Your thermostatic radiator valve gives you the option in various degrees. If you look at this disc here, it's on maximum, which means it's full open and it would be red hot if this was fitted to a radiator. You would have vision of that, and therefore you can turn down the range until it is off. It's off there now. You can then, that would be cold within half an hour. You can move up the range, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then maximum. The idea of that is you can have it off or on, or you can have it lukewarm and to certain temperatures. When this is fitted, the head is easily removed and has no object in its way, and when it is removed there will be no leakages. So you put your grips onto the head and take that off, which then, after it's off, leaves you with a thermostatic radiator valve looking like that. As you can see in the centre, there is a brass pin. Now this brass pin is the total working mechanism of the thermostatic radiator valve. It goes up and it goes down, depending on what number you've got the thermostatic radiator valve. And that depresses onto a washer surface and shuts down the control into the radiator, therefore giving you different temperature range. The reason I'm showing you one of these is for shortcuts and tricks that plumbers use when these have been installed for a long period of time, because the problem with thermostatic radiator valves, they're great when they're working, they're really terrible when they're not. And when they're not, what usually happens is that you've had thermostatic radiator valve on number 4 or 5 for a considerable period of time because you're happy with that temperature. But you then decide to change it. You change the head, because that will turn all the time to maximum, hoping, as it should do, that the radiator will get to its highest temperature. But I'm afraid the pin for stuck in there with all the grit and stayed in a position where you do not want it. You then have to call a plumber. The plumber would come out, he would disconnect like I've done now, he would have a look at the pin, see if it was free. Obviously it wouldn't be, and he would set about freeing that pin. As a last resort, after we've done this, if you can't free the pin, which is very rarely, you have to tell the customer she needs a new valve completely. We would come then and WD-40, release an oil in this area. We would wait 5 or 10 minutes, try depressing the pin. If it didn't work, more WD-40. We would then replace the head. Now the head is easily replaced up to a certain point. Then you've got to make a decision, where do you want the view of the controls from 1 to 7. Normally right in front of you so you can see it. You do it in that position and then you hold the top and finally nip the head to where you want it. Now that WD-40 is working on the pin. So what we've now got is the radiator valve back together and the availability of moving that where we want it. We fully open it to maximum. You will have very hot water coming up to this point, but not going through the valve and not into your radiator because the pin is stuck. So what you do, this is a little trick, what we normally use plumbers, and it always works. You look at the valve, hot to that point, cold beyond, open to maximum, and you judge a point which is usually relevant to the horizontal of that. You then get something like your gas pliers, a little hammer, and you tap gently on that area 4 or 5 times. Normally your pin would release straight away, your WD-40 would be working and you would feel the gush of hot water coming through there and you would know your valve is working. You might have to do that 2 or 3 times, but once it's done, it's free, it will be free. My recommendation with thermostatic radiator valves, and this is always a must for everyone I put in, you tell the customer to use them. Whether they want to use them or not, at least once a fortnight, once a month, turn them. What that does, turn it off, turn it on through the range for 10 or 15 seconds. What that does, it keeps the pin moving and therefore the pin will not stick. So then you can go back to the range you want, 2 or 3 weeks later, go up to that radiator valve and turn it again. It just keeps the pin free and saves you obviously the plumber's call out and the plumber's fee. That's a thermostatic radiator valve. That one is a Drayton, quite commonly used, nice chromium plated and a very good quality valve. You can buy these at various plumbing stockists and you will pay anywhere between possibly 12 and 16 pounds for that one valve. If you want thermostatic radiator valves, highly recommended. We'll put this to one side. We're now going to move on to a stopcock. Now the stopcock, 1/2 inch, 15mm, copper to copper, would normally be fitted in an area, e.g. under your sink, to your shower, to your tanks, where you wish to shut down, stop the water going one way and do a maintenance job. This is a stopcock, brass, not really terribly attractive, but usually it's fitted in a place where it's not visible. The most important thing in fitting a stopcock, which I will go into on site later on, is that on the side of the stopcock you've got an arrow. That arrow points one way. Now the way that arrow is pointing is the flow of water. The water will only travel the way of the arrow when the valve is fully open. If you accidentally fitted the valve with the arrow going the opposite way, you would turn the stopcock on and you'd be wondering why there was no water coming out of your tap. So if you fit the stopcock, there's an arrow on the side, look at the arrow, fit the stopcock in the pipework with the arrow going the way of the flow of the water. This is basically a stopcock, very similar to the tap we showed you, the gold plated tap. It's got a head, a centre screw, a packing gland and a washer. We are going to take the stopcock to bits and just show you. Normally this comes out fairly easy, probably in this instance it won't. We're lucky. Now presumably you'll not do this on site unless you've got water shut off before this. But I'm now taking it out and showing you. It is very easy and very easy to do to change the washer. It is a flick washer off, a flick washer back on. If the washer you put on is slightly bigger, cut it with sharp scissors to the shape of the brass face it's resting on. Quite adequate. In this instance it's got a fibre washer there. If your fibre washer is gone when you replace it, do what I do with the PTFE. Form your own washer, wrap it round, then replace it. Just check your brass face is okay. In this instance we can look down it. Replace your head, hand tied up, one little pressure, and we tighten that up. Packing gland, very easy to do, very simple to do, and exactly the same as the packing gland on most of the items that we've shown you. Packing gland slack, packing gland comes off, slides up your spindle. You can take the head off if you wish, take the centre screw off, gently tap that, your head will come off. What you then have is a packing gland, PTFE, pack your gland and bring your packing gland nut back down and tighten. Tighten with a little bit of pressure, feel your spindle, is it turning fairly free? A bit more, give it a bit more, tighten. Then what you've done is service to stopcock. Bearing in mind that this is in position with the arrow in the flow of the water. E.g. if this was coming out of your mains from the street into your house and away to your sink, you would have the arrow pointing upwards. The stopcock, to maintain your main stopcock like I've just done washer, you have to have the mains turned off in the street usually with a key. Then you put this back. Very rarely you have to change the washer on the main stopcock because it's very rarely used. You might have to change the whole stopcock. Sometimes it's easier, sometimes it's cheaper, and sometimes it's better. You can buy a stopcock in this vicinity from a good plumber's merchants for in the region of £5 or £6, copper to copper. In this instance, half inch, 15mm to 15mm. You would take the old one out, you would put the new one back. No worries about packing gland stopcocks. For the sake of £5 or £6, sometimes it's well worth it. Right, we'll put that on one side. I'll just show you a little radiator valve that is chromium plated, which is the one similar to the one before. This is a pull-off cap, but packing gland, a spindle, everything you want. That's a chromium plated radiator valve. This is what we term in the trade as a gate valve. It has got a red handle on. You'll probably see them in your house, usually in your airing cupboard or your tank area, on what we call a non-pressure pipe, e.g. a hot water pipe. These are made solely for non-pressure pipe work, e.g. hot water. It is got a packing gland, exactly the same as the other ones, your little nut, you take it off, take your head off, do your packing gland. It hasn't got a washer inside of this, so you cannot strip it down and maintain the washer inside of there. It is a brass face against a brass face. It is exactly the same off, on, you can look through it, closed. There's no arrow on these type of valves, so you can put them either way. You cannot make a mistake in fitting them. This one is 3/4 22mm, you can get them 15mm, you can get them bigger, small, whatever you want. They're usually brass and they're usually put in a pipework to shut off the hot water feed to all the taps. Fairly simple, fairly reasonable to buy. You'll pay around about £9 or £10 for one of these. I'll put that to one side. We're now going to go to a brass ball valve. Now this is a normal brass ball valve. E.g. you would have a ball, plastic ball on the end of them, and this would be fitted in your tank or in your cistern, toilet cistern. These check nuts, if you are fitted in a toilet cistern or a tank, you would run your first check nut within ½ an inch of that large nut. You would pop it through the hole in the tank or your cistern. You would then bring a washer on this side. You would then bring your white nut right up to the thickness of the tank and you would tighten that in the area of the toilet cistern. What that would leave you is that whole area of the ball valve, the workability part of the ball valve, in the toilet cistern. The symptoms of a ball valve going is obviously letting a little bit more water than usual and going down your emergency overflow pipe. This happens usually in 3 stages. It will trickle very slowly and go down your emergency overflow pipe, usually during the night when there's less water being used and the pressure is higher. So if your overflow pipe is in a position where you often notice it, you will see a little pool of water on your outside path, whatever, drive in the mornings. If you take no notice of this, that will suddenly get worse as the washer is disintegrating inside of there and run during the day and night, trickling. And if you take no notice of that, the last result is your washer will go all together, it will gush out and really will take the full bore of the emergency pipe. If your emergency pipe, as I said before when we were doing the last toilet cistern and checking the overflow, is slightly blocked, you might find that it cannot take the full force of that and therefore overspills over your toilet cistern, causing a lot of damage. That's why I recommend we check the overflow pipes, which we've done previously, and before it gets to that stage you either replace or check your plumber. Check your ball valve, sorry. I find there's a washer in there with a piston. Basically, for the cost of a ball valve, it is not worth stripping that down to bits and replacing the washer. You can buy the washers for as little as 10 pence each. You can spend a lot of time stripping this apart, which I can show you, greasing it, putting it back, and it is the brass face inside there that's gone anyway. In a few days, a few weeks, you're back to your overflow. I would recommend you go out, buy a ball valve, which you'll pay no more than £5 or £6, sometimes less, at a good plumber's merchant. You will come back with this. If you come back with this and you have one of these actually in your system, you do not need to take it right out of your tank or anything. What you're looking at as you look down on your tank is that part there within your tank. This check nut here, after you adjust your spanners to suit, as you're looking in your cistern, you can turn it and loosen it. So what you're doing, you're running your nut back, bearing in mind there's a little washer in there, so be careful to catch it. So that is in your tank, and this is your ball valve. That's the little washer. It'll probably be stuck on there if it's an old one anyway. So you discard that ball valve. You bring your new one in, you disconnect that from your new one, and you put that to one side. So what you've got is basically this in your cistern, that outside your tank or cistern, and you draw that, making sure you've got the washer in there, the red fibre washer. You draw that to that, and you run the nut up. You can always run these nuts reasonably finger tight to a certain area. You obviously counteract the pressure you're going to put on it by holding your gas pliers that way and tightening the nut gently. What you've got to make sure in this instance, on this occasion, is that your filling point, which is that hole there, is facing down into your tank or cistern. Once you have done that, your ball is being fitted onto the end of here, which is just a thread. Your ball screws on. You can use the old ball, take it off, or buy a new ball. Once that's put into the cistern, you might find the cistern so narrow that the ball is tight against there and doesn't have the flexibility necessary. What you can do is put your grips on. These are very flexible. Make sure you're using 2 points, pressure points, one with your grips, one with your thumb. You're not putting the pressure on the ball valve point, and you just gently twist your ball valve to suit it. That gives it a slightly different angle, so therefore your ball is in the middle of the cistern or tank, and flexibility. You then turn your water back on, and you let the ball valve rise. As we said in the previous occasion, it has got to fill to the line of the back, which is a 2-gallon flush. If it's not up there, then again, you're looking down in your cistern, 2 thumbs, pressure point, fairly soft metal, raise it for more water, bend it down for less water, until you get the happy balance of where it's in position. I feel telling you this solely to supply the ball valve for the cost of the ball valve will save you time and effort, and usually you get at least anywhere between 15 and 25 years out of one of these. So for £5 or £6 in an hour's work, that's fairly good value. That's a brass ball valve. I'm now going to show you a plastic one. And with that being a side connection brass ball valve, it went through the side of the cistern tank. You'll find in a lot of modern items, instead of going through the side of the cistern, it goes through the bottom. Again, simplicity itself, check nut off, disconnect the copper pipe, check nut off, the whole ball valve comes out of your cistern. Bear in mind that when you've turned the water off previous to this, you've flushed it, it always leaves a couple of inches of water in the bottom of your toilet cistern. Get a sponge, a bucket, and siphon it out in some description. So it leaves the toilet with no water in the cistern, and you can take this out quite confidently without spilling any water. Once this is out, you've got two options with this one. You can go and buy a new one, which will cost around about £8 or £9. Again, a new one is complete, as it is there now. You bring it back, you drop it through the hole of your toilet cistern, which is in the bottom. Bearing in mind your washer's on first, you drop it in, tighten your check underneath, and you've got a brand new ball valve, which will last a considerable number of years. If you prefer on this occasion to maintain it, then if you imagine that that is fitted into your toilet cistern, you've turned the water off, you get your grips, and you loosen this large nut anti-clockwise again, and what you have then is various parts of the ball valve coming out. Now in this instance, this ball valve on this occasion is rather a big washer. You take the washer off, you discard it, and you put the new washer back in. Always bear in mind that none of these parts drop out and they're all back in the same occasion. What you find is you've got a little groove in the end of your internal piston with the washer in, and a little groove in your ball valve. You've got to fit these into the same place or they will not work. So if you can see, there's a groove in that part, there's a little lip of plastic in that part, and you fit it in. Simple as that again. You then take your ball valve with the new washer back to the area of where the large nut is. You then gradually introduce it to the nut, bringing it up to suit the ball valve. Now sometimes you have to play about with this, and sometimes they go easy. Even for plumbers, sometimes you've got to get the nut right square on at the right angle. You then run it up with your fingers and give it slight pressure with your gas pliers. You're back with the ball valve, new washer in, and you switch the water back on. When you switch the water back on, it will come to a certain level. Perhaps not as high as before because you've put a new washer in. If it doesn't come as high as before, on this ball valve you do not put any pressure on the arm at all. You have got a self-adjusting screw on the top, always a screw either as it is there now, a long screw or a centre screw. We can turn these usually with your hands, sometimes with a spanner, sometimes with a screwdriver in the end. As you turn it out, adjust it out, your arm rises, so therefore letting more water in the cistern. As you turn it down, it's less water in your cistern. Again, bring it up to the line, the 2 gallon flush. Once you've adjusted the screw to where you need it, it's perfect for a considerable time. This part here is where the actual water comes out of. It's usually got a grill on the end, a little wire mesh to stop any muck coming back in. We do not fit silencers, what we term as silencers, from years ago, where there was a bit pipe from that went into the water and it stopped the noise being too heavy. We are not allowed to do this by water company regulations now, as a lot of the dirty water was siphoning itself back into the system. So therefore there's no silencers on this type of ball valve. That is a plastic ball valve. We've been through most of the material and the fittings and the valves on the workbench that we've been through before. What we're going to do in our next small job is replace a stopcock on site. Fairly easy to do. We're also going to, while we're in that area, replace an outside tap. So we're going to gather our tools and we're going to move on to the next job. Hopefully you've learned a lot from these few items which I've introduced onto the workbench. Thank you. We've come into the garage to change a stopcock because it is leaking badly and flooding the garage floor. This stopcock is the main one that shuts off the outside wash taps in the drive and in the garden area. It is brass, copper to copper, 15mm, ½ inch. It is similar to the one we've just described to you on the workbench. We've turned the mains water off, which feeds the whole house, and therefore we are now able to strip down and take out the stopcock. First of all, we'll get our small shifting spanner and loosen the main 15mm nuts on top and bottom of the stopcock by holding against the head of the tap with your left hand and turning anti-clockwise on the nut. One loose, two loose. Now normally you can run the rest of the nut off the thread with your fingers. Sometimes slide the nut down the pipe, sometimes you've got to go a lot further with the shifting spanner. In this occasion they both come off the threads. We have a stopcock in a tied area which is reasonably flexible for the pipe to come down out of the bottom of the stopcock. So we will attempt to take the pipe out of the bottom of the stopcock, which on this occasion has come out fairly easy. We then have got a loose end, water dribbling out, don't worry, it's only the excess water that's in the pipework. We then take the top of the stopcock out the top, and we have one brass stopcock taken out of its area of pipework. It is cracked and damaged, therefore it is not worth trying to repair or maintain, we discard it. We have obtained a new stopcock, which is copper to copper 15mm in brass. We take the nut and ring off both ends, and therefore we have a stopcock exactly the same as the one we took out, equal in length and exactly the same threads. We will not attempt to put the new nuts and rings on the pipework because the existing nuts and rings are compressed, very good condition, and find it easier to put it back in the situation it's in. We will check that the arrow on the stopcock is going in the direction of the water, e.g. from the house through the stopcock and up to the pipework. So the arrow in this occasion is pointing upwards. We will fit it into the top nut of the pipework and run the nut down hand tight. We will then push the pipework up and back in to the bottom. Slide the nut back up the pipework and replace it on the threads. Fairly easy, most of them are, as far as you can with your fingers. So we took the old stopcock out, we replaced it with a new one, we've run the existing nuts back up to where the olives were compressed, and now we are about to tighten the threads once again. We will hold the centre in line where we want it to end up, which is e.g. as it is now, easy to get to and not in the way of any other item. Clockwise, fair amount of pressure, one tightened. Bottom, fair amount of pressure, two tightened. We have now got a brand new stopcock, fitted back in its existing position, Cost of stopcock £5 or £6 as I said before, and very little time spent on replacing it. This would be a small job where a tradesman would come out and obviously do it, and you would have a reasonable bill. Stopcock changed. If the packing gland on the new stopcock, very rarely, but sometimes it is slack, so it is worth, while you are on doing this, just to put your shifting spanner to the right size of the hex nut and give it a slight turn clockwise, just to make sure it's tight. Make sure your spindle is easy turned, no WD-40, no washer, no PTFE tape, nothing at all, fully open again, flexible and ready to turn off in an emergency or for non-maintenance. We are now going to move on to another small job, which is not too far from this area, and it is stripping down, taking out an old washdown tap for a hosepipe and replacing it with a modern one. We will now gather our tools and move on to that area. We are outside, and this is the washdown tap connected to the hosepipe that is creating problems. The lever is not working too well, and the condition of it warrants that it is due a change rather than a maintenance. You will notice that on this tap it is a lever turn, a quarter turn on in line with the pipe, off to the left of the pipe. It is brass hose union and connects to the tap with a fitting adapter which is placed inside the hosepipe and tightened by means of a Jubilee clip. We'll put that to one side for the moment. We're now going to take out the old tap, so therefore we will grip on the pipework coming through the wall the opposite way to the way we're going to turn the tap off. We'll turn the tap anti-clockwise to slacken it. You will find that most taps, once you slacken them, will turn out fairly easy. Right, that one's come out fairly easy, a little dribble of water, no problem at all. What you're left with, coming out of the wall, is a female iron with a thread in and a male iron on the top. The male iron goes into the female iron and makes a connection. We will discard that tap. Now, if we were replacing it with the same type of tap, which I personally like, it is easy to obtain from a good plumber's merchant. The same is a tap with a spindle and a crutched head. Both exactly the same principle, on and off. They come with the flexible outlet on the end. You can save that for a future date and leave the existing one in the hosepipe, which is the same connection. If you are starting from scratch, then you would put that in your hosepipe, Jubilee clip, and you would have your hosepipe ready for connection. We are going to show you this without making the joint. We place it into the orifice of the female thread and screw to start. What you have in this instance is a quarter turn off, on, simple as that. Basically, water company regulations state that an outside tap must have a non-return valve between the on and off lever and the internal pipework. Solely this is a regulation to stop dirty water, tainted water, siphoning back into your system. They have come up with a nice bright idea in the last 10 years, and they have invented a washdown tap like this with an integral non-return valve within the tap. This is water company regulation tap and must be fitted to the outside of any building where it is used for washdown purposes. We'll take this one back out again and show you the most commonly used one, which is e.g. same again, a male iron thread screwed in gently, and gives you the same principle of a connector that you place in a hosepipe, Jubilee clip, tighten on, and bring your hosepipe up when you're finished. We are going to fit this type of tap and show you how it's done. Basically, we're back to a PTFE tape, which we take out. This time we do not at all snap any off, apart from the little ragged edges that congregate when you're using PTFE tape. We place our PTFE tape, holding our finger on the beginning of the male iron thread, adjacent to the tap. We then run our PTFE tape around the threads, numerous times, 5, 6, depending on the quantity of the tape. We then snap it off. We are left with a male iron thread which is covered in tape in a clockwise motion, holding the tap in your left hand. You get your thumb, your thumbnail, and dig slightly into the threads so that the white tape has taken its course within the threads. We then place it in the orifice of the hole of the female coming out of the house of the thread and gently turn. This usually turns pretty good. You can go most of the way by hand, usually 90%. Your final stages, which is about there, you then do the opposite to what you had before. You counteract your pressure on your fitting coming out, your shifting spanner goes in its position, and what you do then is you turn the tap, hopefully clockwise, at least one more turn, until you get it upright in the position that you require. Discard your tools, take the existing fitting, keep that spare for future reference, bring your hosepipe back and tighten onto your tap. Hand tight is usually good. If you wish, give it a slight nip with your gas pliers and you're back. One new tap, fitted, water company regulations with a non-return valve, and this is classed as a 1/2 inch Horse Union bib tap, obtainable at any plumbers merchants for a cost in between £5 and £10, depending on the area that you live in. That is all you need: Horse Union tap, some PTFE tape, gas pliers and a shifting spanner, and never forget to turn your water off on the mains. And as you can see, the job hasn't taken very long. While we're on with the new tap, just as we did with the stopcock, sometimes in the factory this gets a little bit slack, so you tighten your piping gland just to make sure it's tight. Not too tight or the crutch of your tap will be unobtainable. This is a tap which is very similar to the taps I have shown you, stopcocks. Maintainable packing gland, maintainable tap washer, screw in the centre, screw out, head knocked off, packing gland, maintainable in the future, white PTFE tape, hex nut, strip the whole tap head out, push fit washer, change it, check your brass face and back again. We have now changed the tap, very satisfactory, very easily. Hope you understand it quite well. I'm sure that with a bit of forethought again, the right tools, some PTFE tape and obtaining the correct tap, you will do this small job very easily. We are now going to gather our tools and move on. What we are going to show you now is quite a common call out to a plumber, and that is a cistern like this one. When the customer flushes it either doesn't work or it works every 3 or 4 flushes when you depress the handle. What is really wrong with the cistern on this occasion, with them symptoms, that the siphon inside, which is the total workings of any system, the siphon washer has gone inside the siphon. So we are going to show you how to take the siphon out of a system, change the washer if necessary, and replace the siphon. We've got a system here, on the workbench, if you can imagine it, that would normally be in a situation where you would have a system, a flush pipe to your toilet pan, and you would be able to flush it. So normally we would bend down underneath the system and do the work which we are going to show you on the workbench. So in this occasion we will turn the system to its side and show you the large check nut underneath where the flush pipe would attach. You would have normally disconnected your flush pipe and then taken your grips, bearing in mind that you'll have flushed the system, turned the water off, and sponge with the sponging bucket took any excess water out of the system. We are now going to loosen the flush pipe nut, loosen the siphon nut, and slowly disengage the siphon from the system. As easy as that. Usually is all the time. We will place the check nut to one side. You then, as you're looking down inside the system, will be able to lift the siphon through the system and disconnect it from the handle. What you are left with is a siphon. We will put the system down there just for now. You are left with a plastic siphon, which is normally in very good condition. Through time, discolours in that area. A siphon hook, what we call an S-hook, which attaches to the handle and pulls the siphon up and down in that area. We want to look in this area here and check the siphon washer. So the first thing we will do is disengage the siphon hook from the handle, which sometimes you can work it round, take the S-hook off, which is that, place it there, and drop the whole siphon washer, everything out of the siphon. Now, believe it or not, this little piece of plastic which you're about to see, this is the spring, which sometimes are in siphons and sometimes are not. What that does is when you flush it, is make a quick return to the siphon. As I said before, believe it or not, within this siphon, and most siphons that I can think of, this little piece of plastic flushes the whole system, is the washer. Without this, your system will not work. Simple, easy to buy, reasonable to buy, and you can buy them all shapes and sizes: round, oblong, square, hex. You can find them in all different shapes and sizes. You can cut one out of a piece of plastic yourself and form the shape. You can buy these at most plumbers merchants, and they're called a siphon washer, a plastic siphon washer. What I tend to do when I replace these is buy two and fit two. So if you ever get a hair crack in the first one, the second one is backing it up, so you don't have to go through all this work replacing it and draining down your system. When you have your new siphon washer, you literally place it on top of the siphon holder, put back any necessary washers that hold it in place. If there's a spring, replace the spring. You have now replaced the siphon washer. If you find your new washer is slightly bigger than the plastic area that it lies on, again with your sharp scissors, cut the shape and you have a siphon washer. We are now going to place it back into the siphon, make sure there's no obstructions. When this occasion there is none, and very rarely there is any at all. You have to put it in the necessary hole, where therefore it pushes back up into the siphon area. You have a little hole in the end of your tube. You replace that with your S-hook, double it back round, so you've got a tight hook on that side. And that is it. You got a siphon which works, and usually if you put your hand over the end of the flush pipe tube you can feel the pressure. Now that looks easy, and as customers usually say, I make it look easy. It is easy. It's as easy as that. It's as easy as that. So therefore, what we are going to do now is bring the cistern back to its position where it would be on the wall in your toilet. You slowly connect that to your handle if you haven't disconnected the handle in the first place. We didn't. And you drop this back into position. Sometimes it's awkward to get it past the ball valve, and sometimes it's easy. Making sure on the bottom of this siphon there will be a black washer. The black washer will stay there as you're changing the siphon washer and will not normally discard. Make sure it's on. You drop it back into the siphon hole. You therefore have your new siphon washer on, checked everything inside, no obstructions, and you have your siphon sticking through with a black washer on. You run your check now. Mostly hand tight. Get your grips, in this instance the gas pliers, give it that slight bit of pressure. You now have a cistern that has had the siphon washer changed. You would turn the water on in this moment in time, fill your cistern to the correct level. As I said before, there's a line there, check it, and I'm sure once you flush it, it will flush instantly. The two washers that you've put on there, I'm sure will last for at least 10 years, if not more. That is changing a siphon washer. You can get a tradesman in to do that for you, or you can attempt to do it yourself. I've showed you the easy way to do it, and it's now done. We're now going to move on to our next small job and show you another easy part of plumbing. Right, we are now going to show you a common practice on DIYs, and usually quite common within the plumbing industry. That is cutting into a piece of usually 15mm copper pipe to insert a branch, to take another piece of pipe in the opposite direction, e.g. for a washing machine or an outside tap. We have introduced into our toolkit this small tool which is for cutting copper pipes. Essential, easy to carry, easy to use, and gets into awkward situations. First of all, this is a T-piece, what we call a T-piece, a branch, and it is compression, e.g. it has nuts and rings on each end. So, if you can imagine, this could be in any area of your house, under your sink, under your bath, in the garage, anywhere, and you require a certain position to insert that 15mm branch T-piece into there. First of all, we would find out the area that you want to cut it, then place your branch against the pipework and mark it. You always mark it full slip, which is up to the rim of that as the pipe inserts. It doesn't really matter at this moment in time, because if you make a slight mistake and it's short, then your branch will just be slightly lower or slightly higher. This machine has got a centre point, and that centre point, where the wheel is, must be placed against where the pencil line is. You place it on the pencil line, and it always turns one way. You find that way by just turning it. And really it's as simple as that. If you just keep on turning, and as you can imagine, if you're in a position where it is very close, very tight, near the wall, it cuts off as easy as that. Then a pair of cutters like that, rather than a junior hacksaw or a big pair of copper pipe cutters will come in very handy. You are now left with a cutting and 2 pipes cut. What I would suggest then is that if you can, you push one of the pipes to one side and introduce the T-piece. Take all the nuts and rings off. Place them to one side. A lot easier this way. As you place them to one side, hopefully you can drop your T-piece onto the bottom pipe that you've cut. You will then have that to one side. So what you do then is you come to the top pipe work, find where it is full slip into the fitting, that line there, and mark it. One other way you can do it, you can take your T-piece off, you can measure that distance between the 2 full slips and therefore cut that distance off the pipe where it is. You will find that you can slip this onto the centre, cut it once again. This possibly could be in position, or it could be in your hand if you can get it out. It turns just as easy as that and cuts the pipe work off. You're then left with the T-piece and a piece of pipe which you can push into there. At this stage I would suggest that we put the olives on and the rings, which are usually easily slipped on to the pipework. You would introduce your T-piece to it, push it down hard into slip and bring your nut up. One little trick that we use a lot of times and makes it easier if you can't get into that area with the olives and the nuts, and I find this essential in a lot of times, is you put the nuts and rings onto the areas that you want to introduce to the pipework. Make sure they're right up. Your rings, by putting your finger in there, the rings are in central position. You'll then find, if you look down the T-piece, your ring's in central position. You can introduce it to the pipe and push it down full slip. Saves a lot of hassle, your nuts are up. Now the opposite one, you would be introducing that back down. You can either do it with the loose nut, loose ring, or introduce it the same way. Now that is a perfect connection between 2 points. You can, if you wish now, to tighten them. I prefer at this stage to tighten them, and then when they are tightened, it means the rings are compressed and will not move. Loosen them off in the opposite direction so the nuts are loose. Once the nuts are loose, it means it doesn't matter what you do with the T-piece, whether it falls, whether it goes, whether it does anything. You know your full slip, your olives are compressed, and you can move the T-piece about to suit your branch that's going to come out of this area. So what I would suggest then, if you're taking a new branch through the side of your sink unit, say for instance, to a washing machine, you'd have lined that centre point up, you would mark it on the internal part of your sink unit, and you would drill a hole through your sink unit to take the pipe work. You would cut a piece of pipe slightly longer than your sink unit, about 2 inches into your space where the washing machine's going, and then you would introduce that through the side, through your hole, putting your nut and ring on, into the branch of the T-piece and ringing it up. You would obviously then, once that's in the hole and tight, compress all these nuts a fair bit to compress the rings. Then that should be perfectly watertight. If you were going to do a washing machine, you would then introduce what we call a Washmac washing machine valve. Again, it is similar to the outside tap, the lever one I showed you. It is a 1/4 turn, simple as that. In line with the pipe, the water's on. Not in line with the pipe, the water's off. A 1/4 turn. It's chromium plated, It's a nice attractive valve and is colour coded again. You take the centre screw out, you take that lever off if you want it hot, and you put a red lever on and put the centre screw back. You change the valve from hot to cold without changing the valve, because the valve, whether it's hot or cold, is exactly the same valve. It is only the colour code that makes the difference. We then introduce this to the pipework. You can do it the way I do it, nut and ring on, finger in, make sure it's perfectly central, and bring it into the pipework. You would then introduce that valve in a motion to show that it is in the front of the valve, or wherever you need that valve for easy turning. Once it's in its position and it's easy turned, you would grip the valve very carefully, because it is chrome, obviously not going to be seen, the opposite direction to what you would tighten the valve. You would tighten that fairly tight to compress the ring and make it watertight, and therefore normally you would have this going up to your tap of your sink, your branching your sink unit, going through the side of the sink unit wall, and a washer machine valve on. Fairly easy to do. I've made it look easy, it is easy. This large connection point here, which is a threaded type, is ready to take your washer machine hose. Your washing machine hose has a rubber washer ring. You turn it on very gently, hand tight, and give it a slight nip with your gas pliers. Your washer machine is now, or dishwasher, is now connected and can be used. If you require, before you connect your washing machine, you can put a bucket underneath here, open the valve and flush out any debris that may be lying in the pipework. It is fairly easy to do and costs very little. The compression tee, £2 or less. A pair of these valves, if you need them, £5 or £6. You can plumb your washing machine in for a small amount of money, a little bit of time, and again, once again, have the pleasure of saying, I've done that, I can do it again. I'm now going to take this slightly back off again, because I'm hoping to introduce you to a slight problem that occurs with plumbers when we come into a situation where we want to place a branch. We want to place a branch into an area of pipework. We'd find you've got two fixed ends of pipework. You can't do it the way I suggested, because you cannot raise a pipework, you cannot pull it to one side. So how do you get that in to that area with two slips? It's impossible with two fixed ends. So we'll take it again. We take the nuts and rings off once again. And we introduce this to the pipework, which could be anywhere in your house. We find, with a pencil in your hand, you place the branch against the pipework, and what you have to do, instead of marking the distance between the two slips as we've done before, I find you've got to now introduce it to one slip, which is correct, but then you have to take it past the pipework and introduce it. This might seem fairly complicated, but I can assure you it's not. What you're trying to do is cut a section of pipework out, the total distance from there to there. So what you've got is one slip. When you cut the section of pipework out, because you've got two fixed ends, you can then drop it onto the bottom one. So what happens is, the bit you've cut out is on the top of that. So you can introduce it what we call half slip. So you're going to put your nuts and rings on, and you're going to compress this half slip in each one. And that's the only way you can get the branch in. So to introduce it half slip, I would suggest that once again, you bring it half slip out of your fitting, mark your pipework, and you know exactly where you've got to tighten the nuts. Sometimes these are a bit complicated, and it takes a little bit forethought to get it into the system. Easy enough to do, compression fittings are reasonably more expensive than the solder fittings, but two advantages: they're easier to do, no messy gas bottles solder, and they're easier to disconnect in the future. Whether that was a T-piece, a straight connector, or a branch of any description, that is exactly the way that you put them together. We'll now take these tools away and move you on to our other job, which we are going to show you, which is the heating tank. As we've been going through this video, we've showed you a few small jobs, maintenance jobs, that can be carried out by yourselves quite easily with the knowledge of this video. A bit forethought and the right tools, as I've said before. There's a few things that you should do within a domestic house on a maintenance side yourself, and as a precaution to your heating system and water system. The modern concept, and what is becoming quite fashionable nowadays, is what they call a combination boiler. We in the trade call it a combi boiler. It is basically a central heating boiler and an instantaneous hot water unit combined together, hence combi, combination boiler. They are becoming quite fashionable for 2 or 3 reasons. Mainly, cost conscious. Secondly, it does not need, when you have the combi installed, an airing cupboard with a copper cylinder, tanks above it or tanks in the loft, pipe work. So therefore cuts out any burst pipes, insulation. Obviously if your airing cupboard is being disconnected and your copper cylinder has been taken out. It also gives you more room in the bathroom. You can, e.g., knock your airing cupboard down, have a bigger bathroom, put a shower there, or use the airing cupboard for other purposes. This is the combination boiler. I will not delve into the workings, the capabilities, and the costs of combination boilers. That is on the central heating side. The main reason I've mentioned it is because the only disadvantage, it's not really a disadvantage, but it's a disadvantage in the sense that the customer has got to look after this in the future. On 99% of combi installations, combination boiler installations, it is fed by the mains water. And it's becoming more and more common for people, e.g. moving house and moving into a new house. And I often go into people's houses and find, I'm doing a small job and I'll say, oh, you've got a combination boiler here. Oh, what's that? I'll say, well, it's your central heating boiler. Well, I just thought it was a central heating boiler. Have you checked the pressure? How do you check the pressure? Has nobody told you? Nobody's told us. So then I'll look in the boiler for the customer, open the door, and the pressure gauge reads nil. Therefore, the boiler is empty, is on the way out as regards damaging it, and will in a short period of time not heat the radiators. Can become very dangerous and costly. Within a combi boiler, as you open most of the doors of the combi boiler, you have various gauges, and one of these gauges is a pressure gauge. On this pressure gauge, it usually reads from 0 up to 4 or 5. Between 0 and 1 is the normal pressure of a combination boiler. So when you open the door and look at this pressure point, this pressure gauge, you should, when the system's cold, have the needle registering at least 1 to 1 1/4. Therefore your system is full. If it is less than that, less than 1, half, 0, then you have to fill it. And this is the reason I mentioned this, because the customer themselves has to fill it themselves. When the combi boiler has been installed, it is usually explained by the contractor that we have fitted a valve adjacent to the combi boiler, which is called a combi filling loop. It is a complicated item, which basically means we're taking cold water from the cold mains across this loop and into your heating system. Exactly what the old heating tank used to do in your loft or airing cupboard. When your system needed more water, the heating tank would then produce more water by the ball valve filling and letting more water into the system. It doesn't do this with a combi boiler, you've got to do it yourself. So find out where your filling loop is, your valve and your pressure gauge. Look at your pressure gauge. When the system's cold, it should read at least 1, 1 1/4. If not, find your valve, crack it open, watch your pressure gauge move up. As soon as it reaches the required pressure, which as I said before, is anywhere between 1 and 1 1/4, shut the valve off. Make sure you shut the valve off tightly, because basically, if you do not shut the valve off tightly, and it's passing, the pressure gauge will rise. It will fill very slowly, but it will rise. It will get to a point where usually on the pressure gauge there is a red mark, which means danger. As it reaches this mark, the combination boiler has overpressurized and has to find a way of depressurizing. On the combi boiler there's usually a safety valve. From this safety valve, the contractor normally takes a pipe as an emergency outlet, the same as within your toilet system, outside. So if the safety valve decides there's too much pressure on the combi boiler, it opens and lets the excess water out. One of the disadvantages, and I find this on a lot of combi boilers, whether in the garage, kitchen or wherever, they're basically, contractor does not connect this pipe as an emergency outlet and takes it outside. So therefore, if you overpressurize, the valve functions, lets the excess water out and floods the area where the boiler is connected. You see water running out the bottom of your boiler and you're ringing up for an emergency plumber when you really don't need one. I've often been called out and went to a job where all I've done is depressurize the boiler by opening the safety valve into a bucket, got it back down to 1, and that's all it needed. A little self-explanation by estate agents, people who are moving from the house, notes left explaining this, should be the first thing that should happen. It doesn't. So if you've got a combi boiler, look in the combi boiler, look at the pressure gauge. It'll have a needle, as I said before, usually in white between 0 and 1. It's either green, black, or a slight beige colour at the 1. That's where your needle should be. You'll see a red mark further up, around about the 3, 3.5, 4 mark. The needle should not be up there. Bear in mind that if you look at this pressure point, when the system is working and it is pretty hot, the needle expands about 3/4 to an inch. So you look at a gauge as you open the door and you might see that 2, 2 1/4. If the system is red hot, that is fine, because as it cools, the needle will come down to its correct pressure gauge, which would be 1. If you open the door and the pressure gauge is 1 and the system is red hot, then the obvious intent is there that when it cools down it would be in 0, so it's wrong. Check that you've got the pressure gauge, check you know where it is, check where your combi filling is, your valve, and make sure you know where these are and how to work. If you don't, contact your local plumber, and I'm sure for a short period of time and a small amount of money he will explain this item to you. That's all I wish to say about combi boilers. I will delve into that in another time and another place. A couple of other points. On a normal central heating system, you have a pump. That pump normally is the difference between hot water and central heating. E.g., when you have your hot water on, your pump is not in use. When you have your central heating and hot water on in the winter, your pump is in use. So what happens around about May is that a lot of people with this type of system in, they switch the central heating off because they just want the hot water, which is quite correct. The pump is switched off. Now that pump lies dormant between May, September, October, 4 or 5 months perhaps. And a lot of the time, within systems, the water is very discoloured, sometimes very chocolatey, and sometimes very, very thick. It often solidifies within the pump during the summer and goes hard. So as when you switch your central heating on in September and October for the winter season, your pump should switch on. The motor does, but it's jammed. Therefore, your central heating won't work and you have to call a plumber out. Usually after this stage, you have to have a new pump, which can be quite expensive, anywhere between 100 and 200 pounds. So what I'm suggesting is during the summer, as soon as you switch your heating off for the summer season, once a fortnight, at least once a month, turn your central heating on, 30 seconds a minute. And what that does, it gets the pump going, the motor going, and stops the excess water line in it solidifying. Do this 2, 3, 4, 5 times if you want during the summer season. It keeps your pump moving and doesn't solidify. That's another little tip. There's some central heating systems where your pump is used with your hot water and with your central heating. You don't need to do it with this, but find out if you've got that type of system. With a combi boiler, you needn't do that either, because it is used with the hot water as well. We'll now move on to a system which is basically similar to the one where I've suggested that you switch the pump off and on in the summer season. And we are now looking at our little central heating tank, which is usually in the loft. It is what we class as a 10-gallon plastic or galvanised tank, and is somewhere in the region of 18 inches by 12 inches. This is the sole filling system of your central heating, and as I said before, is usually way above the highest radiator, so e.g. in the loft. What happens again is around about May, you stop using the central heating. So therefore, the water out of this small tank in your loft is not being used anymore to replenish the water in your radiators, which is boiled, evaporated. So therefore your ball valve is in a set position. If it is an old type ball valve, and this quite often happens, around about September, October, you switch your heating back on again. The amount of water you've got in your tank slowly gets used, goes down to your radiators, and evaporates. The ball valve has stuck. It is not letting any more water into the tank. It is jammed up because it is old, whatever reason. Obviously, you will not know this until it gets to such a time when you say, wow, my boiler's not working, my central heating's not working, I wonder what the problem is. You call a plumber in again. Some plumbers go straight to the fault, as I would. The first thing I would check. Others would go round in a circle, not knowing what to look for, but end up at the same place. I would suggest to yourselves that you find this little heating tank, which is probably in the loft, probably insulated with a jacket, with a lid perhaps. Find it, take it off, make sure your ball, just get a hold of your arm of your ball valve and depress it slightly. Make sure there's water coming into your tank and your ball valve's working fine. Do this in the summer, and do this definitely before you switch your heating on before the winter season. If you find that your ball valve is old and sticking, then replace the ball valve with a brass ball valve exactly the way I showed you in the previous part of this video. Fairly simple to do. Turn your mains off, buy a new ball valve, £5 or £6, and change it. Far better have a new ball valve for £5 or £6 than take the risk of an old ball valve jamming up. These are just a few hints which you can operate, e.g. like the thermostatic radiator valves. If you find that a lot of people will find their main stopcock in the house, I've mentioned this to you before. It is a must that you find your main stopcock in the house, and it is a must that it is maintained, flexible and working. Not because of this video, not because of any maintenance you might have to do, but solely be in an emergency. If for any reason you have an emergency, you come back to floods, which often happens in winters, we are called out to them, and you don't know where your emergency stopcock is. I've often went to a house and the water's still pouring through the ceiling because they haven't a clue where the stopcock is. I've then got to find it. A lot of times, kitchen fitters have been in, new kitchen, left the old stopcock, the existing one, behind the back of the kitchen units. It means dismantling the kitchen units, providing a guess within your head where it should be, and eventually find it. After you find it, then you've got to leave access for future reference, maintenance and turning off. Find where your stopcock is, make sure it's working, make sure you can turn it. If not, maintain it in the way I've told you. There's quite a few things I could sit here and talk about as regards plumbing, maintenance, little helpful hints. You can, within the heating system, buy various items which will stop rust creating, flush out your system, and keep the system in good working order. You will find these in a good plumber's merchants, and they're not too costly. Do not attempt to put any form of flushing out or any form of additives into a tank when you have only one big tank feeding your heating system. This is totally wrong, because that one big tank also feeds your hot water taps, and if you brush your teeth, fill a kettle, which you shouldn't do, then obviously you're going to poison the whole family. The additives will be added by a tradesman, usually, when he's installed the system or when he's maintaining the system. You should also, your central heating boiler should be maintained and serviced by a regular service engineer once a year. And I must stress at this point, I am not and have not mentioned any gas work. Gas work cannot be done by any tradesman, any person, or anybody in this country alone unless they are registered Corgi gas installers. The Corgi is an abbreviation which means Corporation of Registered Gas Installers. It is run by the government, and it is law that unless you are Corgi registered, you are not allowed to touch any gas appliances, pipework, flues, boilers at all. We are registered once a year, and we have to have certain certificates, be insured for public liability up to quite a lot of money, and site work is inspected on a regular basis by inspectors from the Corgi Federation. So I must stress, if you have any tradesmen coming into your house who you require to do any gas work at all, servicing gas fires, boilers, or any type of work, make sure they are Corgi registered and registered for that year. In this year, starting 1998, the Corgi Federation is making some identification discs, I believe, with your photograph on, your registration details and your number. Ask them for this identification before they carry out any work. I've often went to jobs where they've been installed by Joe Blogs around the corner. They're not correct, not up to standard, and are quite dangerous in some cases, and can cost a lot of money. Sometimes the cheapest job can end up the dearest job. That is quite often. I'm now going to end this video and hope within the video I've added to your knowledge, added to your forethought, your capabilities of doing small works, and give you a lot of advice and information that is relevant to the plumbing and heating industry. We hope that after buying this video that you will be quite capable of carrying out the small jobs, whether this is the first time, second time or third time. But I'm sure I've installed a lot of knowledge into your mind now that you did not have before, and will carry on with a bit more security, save yourself some money. And I must be truthful, it is very, very difficult in this day and age to get a plumber, a decent plumber, a good tradesman to come and do small works like that. As I'm finding out by a lot of customers who say, I've run around at least 6 to 10 companies. Some promise to come, some outrightly say they're not interested in the small work. So if you're quite capable of doing the small work, then I'm sure it's an advantage to yourself. We'll now sit back and enjoy the video in its format.